How's it going, Andrew?
What's going on, Matt?
Yeah, not much. Still recovering.
How's your mouth?
So, yeah, a little sore at times, you know. The bone was really dense though, so that was good news. The bone I had to regrow with the grafts and everything for them to be able to put the implants in, but yeah, it was really dense. He did a good job numbing me up. It's always kind of weird though when he's got me all numbed up. He drills some pilot holes and then he takes like what I can only equate to like a driver with like a socket on it that holds the implant and starts like slowly screwing it in, and then takes like a teeny tiny little ratchet that's probably set to a certain torque spec. And you hear click 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 as he's like ratcheting this thing into your
You're like a
bone.
cyborg.
I'm like, those are like tools I use to work on stuff, and they're literally like putting stuff into my mouth. So,
Well, you'll be happy to know that I went to the grocery store yesterday and I picked out a bunch of foods that I thought would be the most tasty to baby bird. So I'm ready for annual communication.
no, absolutely not. I mean, I've started venturing out. The first couple days, I ate nothing but cottage cheese and ice cream. But so that was kind of enjoyable. But I started venturing out into some other stuff. Unfortunately, this is the fun part. I got the news that I can't bite into like a sandwich or anything for 3 months.
Yeah, I know. That's why I got a bunch of sandwiches. I got sandwiches and corn dogs. And then I got some Hormel's chili, which I don't know if I need to baby bird, but I think it'd be an interesting change in flavor.
Like when we talked last week, it was before I had the procedure done, obviously. And so I thought for like a week or two, I wouldn't be able to bite into anything. But with where the implants are right in the front on the lower there, he doesn't want me to bite into anything and put any downward pressure on those implants. He wants them to set really well for 3 months. So for 3 months, the entire summer, anything I eat that I would normally take like a bite out of, like a hamburger or a brat or something, I have to like cut up instead. And then, I can't bite off anything for 3 months.
I know. That's why I got you, bud.
Crazy. I was expecting a week or two, not 3 flipping months.
That's a long time. That's a really long time to have to.
Right.
Just like, what's always good though? Chinese food always comes in pre-sliced sizes, so you can just order out a lot of takeout. Right. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, it's like, so like till the end of August, I'm not going to like be able to bite into a sandwich or anything.
But at least like you don't have to like only have like a blended diet. Can you imagine if you had to like blend your meals? Oh my God.
Oh God. I'd be drinking nothing but protein shakes.
You'd lose like 25 pounds. You're like rock and roll. Like, or you could do soups, tons of soups.
Right. I actually think I'm going to go carnivore for these 3 months because that's easy enough to cut meats up into small enough pieces and,
pan fry
the bun if I'm doing a burger, like that kind of stuff. So ground beef.
That's a good way of turning a negative into a positive. You're like, I'm on a carnivore diet.
Right. Yeah. Or I'm going to lose some weight and do carnivore diet for the next 3 months because of my fudged up mouth.
Yep. Making the most of it.
Right.
Oh, man.
So,
well, I got some good news. Some good news. Yeah. So for 2 months, I've been watering what looks like sticks because I put blackberries in, and I've been complaining about these dead sticks that I've been watering for months.
Yeah, they finally started coming in.
Today I walked by one and I paused and I went, is that dead stick? And then it has a shoot coming out of it. And 2 of the 4, I killed one of them. I ripped it out of the ground and snapped it in half to see if it was alive because I got out of the 5. 2 of the 4 have sprouted a little baby leaf. I'm pretty stoked. It made my whole day. I was like dancing around. I was like, oh my God, I thought these things were dead. I thought I was an idiot who was in my yard watering sticks.
So on another fun, like contradictory note to that, my dad goes up north to check on the cabin, right?
Yeah.
And last year we had something digging a hole underneath the slab that it's on. And I set up a trail camera. We never got pictures of it. It stopped coming back after a while. We never knew what it was. So he walks around to the back of the garage, the cabin, and there are 5 badgers.
I was going to say, can I guess? I was going to guess badger. Oh, that's awesome.
Actively digging. Well, it's not awesome that they're digging under the slab of the cabin and removed like 5 bushels worth of dirt from under there. Now we got to get somebody to come in and pump some mud under the slab because there's nothing but a giant hollow cavity under there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a negative to that part, but badgers are cool. You don't get to see them all that often.
Well, yeah. Right? I know. But so he did a little research and he ended up putting some like rags doused in ammonia and like citronella around the hole because they don't like those smells. So they haven't come back, thankfully.
Chase them off.
They can live somewhere else on the property, right? They want to live somewhere else on the property. That's fine. Just don't dig under the cabin.
They're like, ooh, it's kind of warm under here sometimes. I like it.
It's got a nice hard top to it.
I can listen to dad rock sometimes. People play dad rock in that bad boy.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So that was fun.
There's your nature news for the day.
Right.
Cool. Well, let's hit the music and we'll talk about our fun topic today, which deals with what the Lodge teaches you that the world has forgot.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
Cool. So today I want to talk about a fun topic that deals with how does the Lodge experience, the experience of being in a lodge, going to lodge meetings, and doing Mason stuff, teach you some unique etiquette and other types of skills that actually help you in the real world outside of lodge, but that we teach in lodge. So I'm thinking, taking your turns to talk, dressing up, and things like that.
Right on. So what's something lodge etiquette has helped you with in a real world moment?
So for me, and I know that some of my listeners who know me will say that, no, I still do this. Having to wait to stand and be addressed before you speak, so you have to take turns speaking. I'm not always so good at taking turns. I talk over people. Sometimes it's compulsive. But learning that in lodge, you have to stand and wait to be addressed, even though that's the more formalized version of it, right? That in a lodge meeting, you stand. And one thing I've never understood, are multiple people supposed to be standing at once, or are people supposed to wait before they stand?
So technically, you could stand up while somebody else is standing and speaking so that when they're done speaking, you can be called on. You don't have to wait for them to sit down to then stand. And multiple people could stand up, and hopefully the Worshipful Master sees in which order they stood up so that he can call on them appropriately.
I mean, I guess I swore that when I was reading, there's the Masonic Rob's Rule of Order or the parliamentarian stuff. I think only one person can technically be standing. I could be wrong. But either way, even if multiple people stand, that you have to wait until you're addressed to speak so that you learn to take turns so you don't shout over each other. It's been one lesson that I've taken back into the world and slowly improved on. I've gotten better at listening. I also like how the order of it kind of, since you're not able to, technically you're only supposed to be able to speak 2 times. You're able to make your point and then do one response, and then you have to be done. If you're being really organized, it teaches you that when you stand, make sure you have everything you want to say buttoned up and ready to go so that you're not standing up 10 times, be like, actually, figure out what your opinion is, say it, sit down, and if you need to do a counter, and then you're done.
Right. No, I agree that's a good one because I'm a notorious interrupter, especially if I'm having a conversation with somebody and something completely unrelated, but I know I need to get out pops into my head. I'll be like, hold that thought. I gotta get this out right now before I forget about it.
You do that, where you will put your finger up just like you did to the camera. You're like, hold on. I have one thing I have to say. I just have to say it. So you're putting your finger up is essentially you standing up.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I do like the etiquette and the formality of all that in lodge, and it has taught me to pay more attention to what people are saying, because I don't want to necessarily reiterate their point, because then you start beating a dead horse, right? And if they make a point that might kind of mess with what I have to say, then I need to rethink what I'm going to say. So you really need to be paying attention to what others are saying.
I think another thing with the standing to speak that we do with our parliamentarian style, it also teaches me to respect the authority of the person who's in charge of the meeting. And that could be a boss or a coworker who's leading a meeting, and not take charge of the meeting over them or railroad them, because you have to wait for them to say, I'm done speaking, now you may speak, and they allow them to still maintain control over the meeting is a nice lesson. Right. Like, speaking over your boss is a great way to really piss off your boss in the long run, where they're like, dude, I'm in charge of this meeting. You got to let me do my thing. Like, I can't just keep having you just rambling on about whatever the heck you got to say, which is also kind of helpful too.
For sure.
What was something that custom or behavior that Masons do in lodge that surprised you when you first joined? What was something that sticks out?
When I first joined, I think the one that kind of like caught me the most off guard was not only the like standing to speak and then formally addressing the Worshipful Master, but the almost like you're addressing the person you're talking to, right? So if you want to address the whole lodge, technically, you have to, may I address the lodge, instead of just standing up and Worshipful Master and then addressing the entire lodge. There should be that, like, may I, to say that you're going to address the whole lodge, not just him or whoever was speaking prior to that directly, right? So,
yeah, and that's,
I think that one.
Another formality to ask for, like, hey, I'm not just going to talk to you. I really need to tell everybody this. Like, it's kind of sets the tone for what you're trying to do, too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So, what about you?
I think for me, I'd never really run into like how emotion is presented and like all the rules around, putting emotion on the floor. I still don't understand them. I promised myself I would learn them better. I rely on our secretary, John, to help me stumble through. Like, am I putting this on the table or under the table? Where am I putting this on the table? Like, no, you don't need to put
Am I tabling this? Yeah.
And then he's like, well, you're not putting it on or under the table. You're setting it aside. And you're like, oh, okay. I don't know what the difference between those are, but we're setting it aside till next meeting or whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and I like those policies because there's something very, again, old-timey about it, but it also makes sense for like coming to a consensus quickly.
Right. And then you get the whole, it can get very complicated very quickly with like somebody makes a motion, there's a second, you open it up for discussion, and then somebody proposes an amendment to that motion. So then you have to get a second to that amendment and open discussion about that amendment, and then you have to vote on the amendment separately from the motion, and then go back and vote on the motion. And yeah, it can get complicated very quickly.
But it makes sense. And it's like when, a huge part of the Masonic philosophy is that everything should be put in an orderly form, like geometrically, like mathematical formation, right? That using Rob's rule of order and parliamentarian style is like as close as you can get to that. Like everything has its spot, if we all know what it means, right? We don't have nearly enough education on Rob's rule of order or parliamentarian procedures as Masons. I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. I would love an education, like YouTube video or a course through a Grand Lodge that I could take just to learn what all this means in a nice way. Besides, like, reading the books on it are just so filled with stuff that you're like, I really just need the basics, man. I just need to get through it. Like, give me something I can digest. I do think it's orderly and nice.
No, I think that would be a very good series for, I don't know, maybe the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin to put out there about how to properly do Rob's rule of order. That's something maybe the education committee could tackle
I'd
for
like
those
to
listeners we have out there.
I'd like to see it put in the form of like a really boring work training video where there's sketches where they're like, so and so stands up, and then you see a person stand up. It's like, and he says this, and X is like, no, you have to do it like this. And I'd be like, yes. And I want to be just as corny the whole way through. That's what I want.
I think that would be really fun, actually. And I'm going to give a shout out to our good friend Victor, because I know he'll listen to this episode. That's something that we should discuss.
It'd be so good. And the thing is, I think it's helpful because Rob's rule of order only works if everyone understands the minimum, the basics of it. Otherwise, people are standing up all over. Like, it's hard to only learn by being corrected by people being like, nope, you can't. Like, and it's kind of awkward. Like, when you know how it functions, I feel like you're better able to more comfortably operate in that environment too.
Yeah. Right. No, I would agree.
I'm not interrupting. See, I'm waiting to be addressed.
No, you are waiting. So, to continue, to not go down a crazy rabbit hole about Robert's Rules of Order, do you think, like, society has lost some of these manners that we're talking about, and, like, some of this process, like, over time?
I think that what I'm starting to realize is that a lot of these structures were probably created because society was a little bit more rough around the edges, a little more chaotic, and it was probably really difficult for people to get through meetings and get through certain types of social circumstances. And so someone was like, we got to create a method to make this less crazy. And so they made a method, and there's a couple of other ones out there outside of Rob's Rule of Order that also exist that serve a similar function, how to run a meeting effectively. And I feel like we have gotten away from that. So we're returning to the chaotic, shout over one another, loudest is right type of stuff. And that it ends up just being less productive.
Right. We're back to being the British Parliament. That's what you're saying.
They somehow still get through it. They have some rules in there somehow. But it seems like we've gone back to being, it's kind of challenging to always get through certain social interactions like that because there's just, we've talked about civility. We've beaten that with pretty hard, being like, people have forgotten how to get what they want, is what I like to say. Is like, so when you want to get what you want, you have to know how to, for lack of a better word, get what you would like from something. And usually that requires not just, punching someone or, yelling over someone. You might win the battle, but they're not going to give you what you want. They're going to walk away and be like, no, fuck that guy. Fudge that guy. I've been saying too many bombs today.
Nah, whatever. We usually keep it pretty clean, so,
But you know what I mean? Like, they're going to be like, no, you might have screamed me out of the room, but you didn't change my mind, and I'm not going to give you what you want. It's like the classic example is the Karen in the coffee shop flipping out over whatever problem it is and just screaming. It's like, what were you trying to achieve? It's like, well, I think that they made my coffee wrong, so I deserve a free coffee. It's like, well, by you throwing the coffee at them, you are now no longer getting that coffee. Like, but had you approached it in a sensible way and said like, hey, here's the deal, and are trying to actually achieve something, your strategy is significantly more calm, more cool, more organized, and more reasonable. And there's strategies for that. And I think we've turned into a bunch of people having temper tantrums.
I would agree, especially when the conversation turns to like politics. It can get pretty ugly, especially on social media, where you're not looking somebody face to face, you're typing a response, and that can get, that's a whole nother dynamic in as far as social etiquette goes that really throws a wrench into the works these days is all the online interactions you can have with, quick responses and replies and everything else on comments on threads and stuff like that. Like, I feel like a lot of this, and where the written word should be where you can definitely express civility because you have time to think about what you're going to say in response, I feel like it's gotten totally thrown out the window there.
Yeah, and even here, like to bring it back to lodge etiquette, how we don't talk about religion and politics at lodge because it creates disharmony. And I've run into it quite a bit where people go, well, that only means lodge. I can speak about it all I want outside of lodge. And you're like, yes, but it's also a good training course, right? To be like, don't just every room you go into start running your mouth about religion or politics. Like, you should choose how you use them and when to talk about them and with who to talk to them about based on what your desired result is. If you walk into a room and just go, ha, F so-and-so politician, you're just like, okay, you just started a fight. Is that what you wanted to do today? And you're like, yeah, no, I just wanted to express myself. And you're like, okay, great. But like, it's another good thing that since becoming a Mason, I very rarely speak about religion or politics ever. Barely ever to anyone.
Right.
And the only time I ever do is when someone provokes me, where they start poking at me. I never start the conversation. I have occasionally fallen into being drawn into the conversation.
Right.
But I'll never be the one who comes into a room and be like, you know what I want to talk about today? I want to talk about this policy. And you're like, what?
Right. Right. Well, and I think it's an interesting point, though. Like, we don't talk about it in lodge, right, to keep the disharmony away. However, the lessons that we learn in lodge about how conversations should be had and the civility of conversations can be applied to those kind of conversations in the real world and actually make those conversations productive instead of name-calling shouting matches.
Well, and it helps that, even though we don't talk about it, people suss each other out a little bit, but then instead of living in a room of people where you're like, I live in an echo chamber where I can say as mean things as I want about whatever political or religious group I want, it's harder to do when you're like, oh, but my buddy so-and-so, he's one of those. So I feel a little bit bad just going completely, crazy about it. They're going to be like, now I'm going to try to be more civil and be like, I disagree because of ABC, instead of just taking widespread swathes of just generalizations and just anger spewed on stuff. You'd be like, oh, but three of my buddies are also that group too. So, I guess they're fine, but not the others. And you're like, okay. So it ends up making you, I think, a little bit more prepared to speak more civilly because you're also like, you're not talking about the other. You know what I mean? Too many people are like, I don't know any of those people, so it's easy for me to talk poorly about them when it's just some fictional memory group. But when there's people you're like, maybe I should be nicer. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Which brings up how we call each other brother in lodge, and especially during the lodge meetings. When someone stands up, usually they don't go, I stand up and they go, Andrew. They'll go, brother senior warden, or brother Andrew, or worshipful brother so-and-so. Will, especially in the lodge meeting, whereas like in fellowship, I might use brother, I might not. In the meeting, we are pretty strict about using either the title brother or brother followed by their officer title or worshipful brother. Right. It's almost like before you start talking, you're reminding them like, we're on the level. We're brothers. Remember, we're brothers. Right. Before we get started. We're brothers.
Right. Well, and, it's also a call back to the tie that we all have, that at the end of the day, we are all brothers. So we can disagree, but we're still brothers, and we need to remember that in how we conduct ourselves with each other.
Yep. And so it's almost like a reminder. The moment they stand to speak, and maybe it's a controversial topic, you address them as brother to like almost remind them like, remember, we're brothers here before you start talking. And you're like, right. Maybe you should cool it if you're too hot. And if, just remember we're all on the level here, right? So I think that's kind of a powerful one. And I think when you practice doing that with your brothers in lodge, I think it naturally just becomes a habit for you as well to kind of treat people like their brothers. And I think there's parts in our ritual that talk about we treat the rest of the world in a similar manner, more especially a brother Mason.
Right, exactly. And I think that manner of addressing people like really, really helps reinforce that like it's the place to have civil conversation.
Yep. So do you think that the way that we use ritual to open and close the lodge has any effects on how you conduct yourself outside of lodge? Do you learn anything from what that practice does that you can take into the world?
Ooh, that's a good question. If I would say it, the first thing that immediately jumps to my mind about that is just the discipline of being able to do something time and time again and doing it right and putting in the work to make sure it's right and taking the time and patience to set the scene, so to speak, and set the scene properly.
And with the set the scene, it always reminds me, like that education piece I did on the importance of opening and closing the lodge, the idea that you should be able to slow down before getting to something to put yourself in the right mindset is another good one. Being like sometimes you rush through stuff and you're like the importance of using a ritual to open yourself up to whatever task you're doing, like your morning ritual. I'll get up, I'll do the 3 S's, the shit, shower, shave. We'll get a coffee. Usually now that it's warm outside, I'll go outside and check on my plants or do some watering, get dressed, get nice, sit down and start working. And so like taking the time to do your like get things going ritual and like get yourself in the right mindset can be kind of like sharpening your axe before you work. It's like just if you rush out, come flying in at full speed, all disheveled, sit down and start working, you're going to carry a lot of chaotic baggage with you. So I think that the power of that we can learn from the opening and closing ritual, and there's a lot more you can talk about with that, is partially trying to create a calm and ordered space before you start getting to task.
Right, exactly. And if I recall correctly, in our vast library of episodes at this point, I do believe we did an episode particularly about opening and closing and the importance of doing it and why we do it.
I forget, but I wouldn't be surprised since I probably did that education at Lodge and immediately came on the podcast and said, I have a topic.
Right. I'm just trying to give a callback if our listeners missed an episode at some point. In fact, I'm going to pull it up and look at our episode list real quick. But
well, while you're looking, I'll just start rambling. So at the same time, I do agree that I think it does not only teach the patience to say like, hey, take your time, but also like you mentioned, like try to make sure you're doing things well. And even if it's something that, may feel kind of monotonous isn't the right word, but, like it's repetitive, that you can find there's still a lot to be learned in repetitive things.
Right, exactly. Sorry, I'm still looking. I feel like we did do one. I feel like if we didn't, we need to.
Oh, we definitely can.
Right, so what do you got next?
So I was going to talk about, we talked a little bit about etiquette and politics and civility and stuff like that. Have you ever resolved a conflict with a brother using customs that you learned from Lodge? Because I definitely have.
Ooh, that's a good question. And I'm like scouring my brain for a time that I would actually say like I had a conflict with a brother at Lodge. And I don't really know that I have like any.
Yes, you have. I can think of times that you've had to use. I'll give you a hint. It's the ability to go directly to the brother quickly and squash it.
Oh, right. Yeah. There's been a couple of those.
Yeah. Or whisper wise counsel. That's why I call it squash it. Is
right.
Go up and
whisper
just
wise counsel
before you spend weeks and months backbiting about it. Just going directly to brother and being like, "Hey, man, I think we need to talk." And taking him into like the classic, take him into the conference room. But can we talk for 5 minutes? And just immediately just airing it, getting it out, and being done with it. And just he says their point, you say your point, you whisper wise counsel, and you just move on. That's something that I definitely learned from Lodge because I hate conflict, and I've had to do it more than I like.
Or those times where you see two other brothers that are like totally getting along, and you do, hey, it's not the time or place right now, like
the talkers in Lodge.
Right.
I've been trying to figure out because we've had some serial talkers recently during opening and closing, which is the only time I get really bent out of shape about it. Usually, like during the meeting, like when we're talking about business and stuff, or someone's not presenting, right? So, like, we're just going through whatever business, a little bit of murmuring. Like, I assume they're maybe talking about the business of the day or whatever. That doesn't bug me. It's when someone is A, doing posting, B, presenting an education piece, shush up, you know what I mean? Or opening and closing is the only time. I've been trying to figure out, I don't think I'm really supposed to leave my station, but I've been very tempted just to climb down, walk over and be like, guys, I will walk over here if you guys don't stop, and just be like, because I'll be staring at them, gesturing and pointing at them and being like, trying to catch their eyes. And I'm gonna be like, I'm just going to walk down there and be like, brothers, come on. He's posting right now. Enough.
Right. That might almost cause a bigger distraction. I wasn't even talking about that kind of stuff. I was talking about, like at like an event or something like that that's like open to the public, or maybe there's other bodies there and two brothers aren't totally getting along, and you have to be like, hey, this is not the time nor the place to deal with this. Let's deal with it afterwards, or not in front of these people, or
Yep. Go take it privately and just discuss what you need to discuss.
right.
That's definitely one I've used at work a couple times.
Yeah.
Not that one, but the take somebody aside.
Right. To call back to what we were discussing before, season 1, episode 32, for any listener that might be interested, opening and closing is key. So
it is
key.
key.
Do an episode about it.
Yeah, it's important.
It is.
Ever since I did that education piece, I've had I know I've done it at South Shore, but I've had a couple of lodges reach out, and I always feel like it's a tired past master. It's like, can you please explain to these guys that opening and closing is important, please? I'm so bad at watching bad opening and closing. You're like, yeah.
Like, that sounds similar to my education about proper dew guards and signs.
Yeah, right. Oh, I know. Like, let's just get it right. Like, everything is supposed to be neat and organized and planned. So make it look neat and organized and planned.
Right.
The other fun one, which I like to talk about because I know it always causes controversy because people don't believe that it's important, is one's dress, demeanor, and general air of dignity. Some people, so at least in our lodge, our culture says that we do some casual, but most of the year we're dressed up. But even when casual, you're not supposed to look like a slob. You're supposed to be business casual, right? You're supposed to have an air of dignity,
right,
a good demeanor, even if it is a casual demeanor, right? And I think that this one is, I've seen it bemoaned on Reddit. I've seen it bemoaned on Facebook. Like, our lodge, we don't dress up. We never need to dress up. And I think there's this anti-dress up sentiment that people get without realizing, like, I never used to dress up before I was a Mason, and since I've learned how to dress up and how to be comfortable dressed up, I have used it in so many professional situations when it calls for it in only a positive way.
Right.
Not having the ability to dress up or the discomfort usually comes from, one, not having a good suit, knowing how to do it well. And so it comes from self-consciousness, I've found. They're like, I feel like I look dumb in this. It's because they don't know they don't have enough experience. And I think that Masonry can provide that experience to build your confidence, to look professional.
I would agree. And I mean, I wasn't one to really dress up. I hadn't owned a suit in years before I became a Mason. And, I think there's also something to kind of harken back to what we were talking about having like a ritual. There's something about it putting yourself in a different frame of mind when you go through the process of, tying your tie and putting on a suit and getting ready to go and, everything else. You find yourself at a different point. And I think that's important because, it sets you up to get into the lodge and do the work and act civilly and be brothers with each other. And it also, and this is maybe just my perception, but, we do our baseball jersey night for our stated meeting in April.
Yep.
I always feel like because people haven't gone through that prep time of putting on a suit and everything else, like our opening and our close suffer, and there's more of a light air to the meeting, a little less adherence to Robert rules of order. There's more jokes going on. There's more, you know what I mean? It changes the demeanor of the lodge because we're not in our suits. We didn't take that time to do the mental preparation. We're not dressed like that. So we behave slightly differently.
I 100% agree that what you wear, so like in traditional ritual, you would usually have some sort of costume, right? Some sort of ritual garb. For a Mason in the Blue Lodge, that would oftentimes is a tux or a suit, right? Or a dark suit. And the point of it is that your brain knows that when you're wearing this is what the time is. And it's a tool. And that same tool can be applied to other professional situations where you want to give an air of confidence or control by always saying, when I'm in this type of situation, I will be wearing a suit. It ends up tricking your mind to help you to be better. And so I think that it's important, and I'm not trying to step on any lodge's culture who likes a cash, who likes to just have a more casual meeting, but life is pretty casual to begin with, right? And so it's nice to have one area where you can practice to unlock the skill and the power of the ability to dress professionally. Because there's a reason that people have cared about how they dress since ancient times. Has it mattered when how you present yourself like that? That it's good that in Masonry, if your lodge has that culture, it can give you that strength so you can bring it into other situations, whether it be a job interview, professional meeting, wedding, your ability to present yourself with dignity and with, class. I think it's good. I think it's a good skill for anyone to have, even if in their personal life, like, yeah, I rarely do, but it's nice to have in the back pocket.
Right. Agreed. And there's actually, I've noticed a secondary benefit to it with us going out after the lodge meeting. All of a sudden 10 guys roll into the Irish sports pub in suits or tuxes. And how many conversations have gotten started about Freemasonry with other people in the pub because of the way we were dressed when we showed up, because we stood out, because something was different. And people were like, ooh, what's going on over there?
It puts it in a good light too. Like they look slick.
Right.
They look nice.
Right.
It's a connection not only to just, back in the 1700s through 1950s, some form of a suit or some sort of formal attire was considered pretty important. And I think as a society, we've definitely moved away to more casual, which I like. I don't wear a suit every day at work, thank God. Mm-hmm. But when I do dress up for work, I still try not to look shabby. I still will put extra effort in. I still put a tie on once in a while just to look, the part. I'm not required to. But I never would put a tie on for work until I became a Mason. And then it stopped annoying me as much because ties used to feel like they're choking me. But then your neck, I think, gets calluses. They get used to
it. I think my customers would be like, what the heck is going on if I showed up in any way, shape, or form dressed up to do my job?
I think in your job, the equivalent would be wearing a polo tucked in and a pair of work pants. And you'd be like, boom, it's professional for my work.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Still some professional vibe.
Yeah.
I don't think about it. The last one I was thinking about is I think there's a lesson in how we tile our meetings. Not everyone gets in. Not everyone belongs inside. I think that is a good lesson on setting personal boundaries and not letting other randos razz ya. We're talking online, the army of mysterious, faceless keyboard typers.
Keyboard warriors.
Yep. Yeah. Like, I think we allow too many people who don't matter to bug us. And I think the allegory of the Tyler saying, hey, we're closing the door, can kind of teach you to remember to filter out what you allow to bug you and what gets into your mind.
Ooh,
the
I
inner
like that
Tyler.
take on it. I've never really thought of it that way. I like that take on it. And
how do you guard your own peace, Matt? How do you guard your own peace?
Yeah, I'm not good at guarding my own peace, honestly. So, yeah, this lesson is going to give you something to think about here.
I've had multiple conversations with brothers in a moment where somebody or something has really bothered them. And I've always said, who the heck is that guy? When have you ever cared about his opinion? Have you ever cared about his opinion once until he said that one negative thing? And now today he's the most important person in the world to you? Like, guard your own peace, because like there's a lot of things that, an ape can make some mouth sounds at you, some bark, 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 and you just go, my day's ruined. My day's ruined. They made mouth sounds at me. Right. It's like, who is he? Is that your best friend? Is that your family? Like, it hurts when it's someone close to you. There's just some random dude. Who cares? You know what I mean?
Right.
No, what I think a Stoic philosopher said something. It's like, God, what was it? It was like, yeah, you never care about a person until he says one negative thing about you, and then suddenly you're like, suddenly he's the most important person in the world for no reason.
Right. Your world is consumed by him for that,
and he might not deserve it.
That is really good, actually. You're letting him live rent-free in your brain, right?
Yeah. So with the rent-free in your brain, now that you're thinking about it, how would you, if you could choose, how would you decide who or what you let into your personal brain lodge?
Oh, jeez. That is a doozy. I mean, how would I decide? Case by case? I don't know.
My
general
rule is I really try not to care unless it's somebody who is either my friend, my family, or somebody who has the power to directly affect me, like my coworkers, my boss, stuff like that, or somebody who's earned my respect, right? I'm not going to... Right. If I see a person I thought he was the biggest dum-dum I've ever met, I'm not going to suddenly believe him when he makes a negative remark because he made a negative remark, right? So I try to only give my credence or what affects me as someone I respect or a family member, friends, etc., or a coworker or something like that. Even coworkers, most of the time, I don't care what they say. But if it was somebody I respected, then it hurts because you're like, you know, they're good for it. And you're like, dang, maybe I am in the wrong.
Right. No, that's a good way to look at it. Oh, man. Now I'm not going to sleep tonight.
I think the last thing with the Tyler we can think of, too, is the Tyler is the one who says yes or no. So that comes back to the secret value of no.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
Guarding your time with the Tyler sword is a big one, too.
Right.
That one I've not learned from Lodge.
No, Masonry will not necessarily teach you that until all of a sudden you look at your plate and you go, whoa, my plate is full. I start saying no, you know. I'm not totally to the my plate is full part, but, you know, there's definitely some things I could probably cut back on, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, no is, you know, if you have to stop and go, do I really want to do that? The answer should probably be no.
But if that's everything, what if it says anytime anyone asks me to do anything, I go, do I have to?
That is not true, and you know it.
I think it's my dad brain starting to come in where everyone's like, oh, I need help with this. Like, oh, God, I have to go do a thing. Even though I secretly want to, I'm like,
Right. Like certain things you get excited about, right? Like you get asked to do X, Y, or Z, and you're like, yeah, I definitely want to do that. So, yes, I'm in. But it's those things where you're like
being a trustee.
It seems right. It's sometimes.
For me, it's been every time.
I actually kind of enjoy being a trustee at times. Usually when I can, like, you know, put my hands on the problem, fix it, and walk away from it solved. You know, that's usually when I like being a trustee.
You know when I like being a trustee? The only time I've ever liked being a trustee is the moment the task is done and we step back and we look at it and go, oh, that's pretty nice. That looks pretty cool. For that small window, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I like it. Every other moment, though, for old Drew, no. When I got that, I see a trustee email come through like this morning. I see it on my phone and go, oh, what is it now? Is the AC making noise? And I go, oh, every time. I have to thank Grant for making me do this.
I've enjoyed, like, as much as we like to, like, moan and whine about it at times, the whole being a trustee thing, I've enjoyed my time as a trustee just for the simple fact that, like, I've seen stuff get done in the building. Like, there's stuff I can point to and be like, we did that. Like, the baby changing stations in the bathroom. So, you know, the
pipe and drum
the way
room.
The charters are, right, the pipe and drum room, the way the charters are arranged on the walls. Soon, hopefully, the new parking lot. You know, like, and we can sit back and go, we made that happen, and this place is better for it.
Yeah,
you know?
I like that part, but I hate the rest. I hate it every day. Every day.
You do not.
Yes, I do. I've made that very clear, but here I am. I still do it. I do my job, but doesn't mean I have to like it.
You're done with your first 3-year term at the end of the year, aren't you?
Yippee, only 3 more to go.
Right. Well, you get a year off, kind of.
No, I'm in the room still. I'm just master and in the room. Oh, wow.
That made me think of something. Okay. That's a conversation for outside the podcast, but that made me think of something. Okay.
Any other lessons that you've learned in your experience of Lodge that you bring out into the real world? Anything that's on your mind?
Not that we haven't covered already. I feel like we've covered a lot of the things when it comes to, like, this, what we're specifically focusing on.
I think the other big one is being organized is one thing I've taken out, is that as far as when you're in Lodge leadership, like, the ability to organize and execute plans is another one that I use constantly at work that I learned. I mean, not that I didn't know how to do it, but I've sharpened as a Mason that I bring back to my personal life and careers.
That's a good call. That is a good one. So, but no, I think this is a good place to end it. We got a long week of Masonry this week.
Oh yeah.
So,
to
when
our
this
listeners,
episode comes out, go ahead.
if you're listening right now, there's a decent % chance that you're in a car currently on the way to annual communication. So if that is the case and you're coming to Wisconsin's annual communication because you're a Wisconsin brother, we will have a booth set up. So come visit us, hop on the podcast for quick interviews. It's going to be fun. We'll be there on Friday in the morning, in the afternoon, and briefly after session is concluded. And then we'll be there again on Saturday morning, right?
Yep. That's the plan. Unless we just get so much crazy content on Friday, we decide not to do it on Saturday. But I highly doubt we would turn people away on Saturday. So we'll be there.
Yep. We'll at least see us around to say hi. Yeah. And on top of that, be sure to join us on Discord. We've been getting a little more traction on there. Some of our fun brothers have been posting and chatting around, and so it's been fun. So if you're interested in Discord, so you can chat with us in real time and other fans and brothers from all over the state and sometimes around the world, come on down. And
I do.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm addressing you. I'm letting you address.
Well, no, just finish doing what you were going to do.
May I address the fans?
Yes, you may.
Excellent. Be sure to follow us on social media. Check us out on Facebook, on TikTok. Keep you up to date with what we're doing. And, take some of these lessons. Remember to stand before you speak at your next meeting in Lodge. Don't just blurt out. Stand up. Give respect. Listen before you talk sometimes, even though I don't. And, remember to dress up when the moment calls for it and guard your inner mind lodge.
Right. Yep. That sums it up. I do want to give a shout out to the Third Degree Masonic podcast. If you guys are at all interested in talking about hearing about iconic figures in Freemasonry's history, they have an excellent episode, Brother George Washington, and an even better episode about Brother Benjamin Franklin, who I did not know a lot of the things about him, and that episode was just absolutely stellar. So go over and give the Third Degree Masonic podcast a listen, if for nothing else, those 2 episodes.
Are those their 2 most recent? I'm a couple behind right now. I need to get caught up.
Yep.
Oh, I'm going to have to check those
out.
Those
are their 2 most recent. So I've thoroughly enjoyed both of them, and they're going to follow it up with a discussion on which one of the 2 should actually be considered our icon of Freemasonry here in the United States. So,
oh, that's cool. My vote's for the Marquis de Lafayette, but whatever, it's fine. But
yeah, no, those episodes are really well done and worth the listen. So
awesome. Well, to our listeners, let us know on social media what Masonic etiquette or norm has saved your butts in the wild. And other than that, have a great day.
Take it easy, everyone.